Welcome to part 3. Let us recap. In part 1, we saw about Helmut's story, Goebbels' story. Then we saw why Germany was declared as they have did crimes against humanity. To going back to the First World War, we saw about the weak Weimar Republic, the Treaty of Versailles, which was a humiliating peace for Germany, and as the effects of First World War, the German have to pay reparations. Then the Great Economic Depression and proletarianization, which is about losing job or depromoted in their ranks. So when we came to part 2, we saw about Hitler's rise to power from a soldier to chancellor. Then we read about the Nazi party and their propaganda style and the special unique features of Hitler. Let's go into the part 3. The destruction of democracy. On January 30, 1933, President Hindenburg offered the chancellorship, which is the highest position in the cabinet of ministers, to Hitler. Nazis had managed to rally the conservatives to their cause. Hitler set out to dismantle the structure of democratic rule. At the same time, a mysterious fire that broke out in German parliament building in February facilitated his move. The fire decree of 28 February 1933 indefinitely suspended civic rights like freedom of speech, press and assembly that had been guaranteed by the Weimar Constitution. Then Hitler turned on his arch enemies, the communists. Most of them were hurriedly packed off to the newly established concentration camps. The repression of communists were severe. Out of surviving 6,808 arrest files of Düsseldorf, a small city of 500,000 population, 1,440 were those of communists alone. They were only one among 52 types of victims prosecuted by Nazis across the country. On March 3, 1933, the famous Enabling Act was passed. This act establishes dictatorship in Germany. It gave Hitler all power to sideline parliament and rule by decree. All political parties and trade unions were banned except for Nazi Party and its affiliates. The state established complete control over the economy, media, army and judiciary. So special surveillance and security forces were created to control the country. Apart from already existing regular police in green uniform and the SA or the stormtroopers, these include the Gestapo, secret state police, the SS, the protection squads, Criminal Police and Security Service SD. It was the extra constitutional power of these newly organized forces gave the Nazi state its reputation as the most dreaded criminal state. People could now be detained in Gestapo torture chambers, rounded up and sent to concentration camps, deported at will or arrested without any legal procedures. The police force acquired power to rule with impunity. Hitler assigned the responsibility of economic recovery to the economist Hjalmar Sachset, who aimed at full production and full employment through a state-funded work creation programs. This project produced the famous German superhighways and the people's car Volkswagen. In foreign policy also, Hitler acquired quick successes. He pulled out of League of Nations in 1933, reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936, and integrated Austria and Germany in 1938. He then went on to wrest German-speaking Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. So he was receiving an unspoken support from England. Because England considered the Versailles verdict was too harsh. These quick successes at home and abroad seemed to reverse the destiny of the country. Hitler did not stop here. Sachset advised Hitler against investing large amount in rearmament as the state still ran on deficit financing. But Hitler rejected his advice. Hitler thought that to solve the economic crisis, he accumulated the resources through the expansion of the territory. And puppet regimes supportive of Nazi Germany were installed in a large part of Europe. By the end of 1940, Hitler was at the pinnacle of his power. Hitler now moved to achieve his long-term aim of conquering Eastern Europe. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. And this started a war with France and England. In September 1940, a tripartite pact was signed between Germany, Italy, and Japan, strengthening Hitler's claim to international power. He attacked Soviet Union in June 1941. In this historic blunder, Hitler exposed Germany's Western Front to British aerial bombing and the Eastern Front to the powerful Soviet armies. The Soviet Red Army inflicted a crushing and humiliating defeat on Germany at Stalingrad. After this, the Soviet Red Army hounded out the retreating German soldiers until they reached the heart of Berlin, establishing Soviet hegemony over the entire Eastern Europe for half a century thereafter. Meanwhile, the USA has resisted its involvement in the war. Japan occupied French Indochina, was planning attack on US naval bases in the Pacific. Japan extended its support to Hitler and bombed the US base at Pearl Harbor. This made US to enter the Second World War. The war ended in May 1945 with Hitler's defeat and the US dropping of the atom bomb on Hiroshima in Japan. Let us now see the Nazis' worldview. Nazi ideology was synonymous with Hitler's worldview. According to this, there was no equality between people, but only a racial hierarchy. In this view, blonde, blue-eyed Nordic German Aryans were at the top, while Jews were located at the lowest rung. They came to be recorded as anti-race, arch enemies of Aryans. All other colored people were placed in between depending upon their external features. Hitler's racism borrowed from the thinkers like Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer. Darwin was a natural scientist who tried to explain the creation of plants and animals through the concept of evolution and natural selection. Whereas Herbert Spencer later added the idea of survival of the fittest, which we can say as per the forest rule, only the strong and fittest can survive. Others need to die. According to this idea, those species survived on Earth could adapt themselves to the changing climatic conditions. So his idea were used by racist thinker and politician to justify imperial rule over the conquered people. The Nazi argument was simple. The strongest race would survive and the weakest one should perish. The Aryan race was the finest and it had to retain its purity, become stronger and dominate the world. Another aspect of Hitler's ideology related to geopolitical concept of Lebensraum, or a living space. He believed that the new territories had to be acquired for settlement to enhance the area of the mother country. And he also wanted to enhance the material resources and power of German nation. So Hitler intended to extend German boundaries by moving eastward to concentrate all German geographically in one place. Poland became the laboratory for his experimentation. Nazis in power began to implement their dream of creating an exclusive racial state. Pure and healthy Nordic Aryans were considered desirable. Germans who were seen as impure or abnormal had no right to exist. Under the euthanasia program, Helmut's father, along with other Nazi officials, had condemned to death many Germans who were considered mentally or physically unfit. Jews were not the only community classified as undesirable. Many gypsies, black living in Nazi Germany, were also considered as inferiors. They were seen as a threat for the biological purity of the superior Aryan race. When Germany occupied Poland and parts of Russia, the civilians were captured and forced to do the work as slave laborer. Jews were considered as stereotyped as killers of Christ and assassins. Until medieval times, Jews were barred from owning land. So they survived mainly through trade and money lending. They were often prosecuted through periodic organized violence and expulsion from the land. However, Hitler's hatred of Jews was based on pseudo-scientific theories of race, which held the conversion was no solution to Jewish problem. They should be totally eliminated. In 1933 to 1938, Jews were allowed to leave the country. But the second phase took in 1939 to 1945. They were accumulated in concentration camps and eventually killed them in gas chambers in Poland. Genocide and war became two sides of the same coin. Poland was annexed to Germany. Poles were forced to leave their homes and properties behind to be occupied by ethnic Germans. Poles were then herded like cattle in the other part called the general government, the destination of all undesirables of the empire. Polish children who looked like Aryans were forcibly snatched from their mothers and examined by the race experts. If they passed, they were adopted by German families. If they failed the test, they were deposited in orphanages where they perished. With some of the largest ghettos and the gas chambers, the general government also served as the killing fields for the Jews. Okay, children, we will continue in the next part. Thank you.